What if I told you that the boundary between life and death is an illusion you've been conditioned to believe, that the afterlife isn't some distant realm you'll reach after your heart stops beating, but rather the very reality you're experiencing right now, in this precise moment? My name is Carl Jung, and what I'm about to share with you comes from decades of exploring the deepest layers of human consciousness. The psychiatric establishment tried to silence these findings. My colleagues called my later work dangerous. Some even suggested I'd lost my grip on reality, but here's what they couldn't explain. The evidence for what I discovered appears everywhere, in every culture, in every dream, in every synchronistic event that defies rational explanation. You see, I spent my entire career studying the unconscious mind, and what I found there changed everything I thought I knew about the nature of existence itself. The unconscious isn't just a repository of forgotten memories or repressed desires. It's a doorway to something far more profound, a dimension where time dissolves, where the dead walk among the living, and where the very fabric of what you call reality reveals itself as something entirely different. But here's where it gets unsettling. The more I explored these depths, the more I realized we might not be moving toward the afterlife at all. We might already be living in it, surrounded by evidence we've learned to ignore. If that opening left you questioning everything you thought you knew about consciousness, good, because what I'm about to reveal will fundamentally challenge your understanding of where you actually are right now. During my famous break with Freud, something happened that medical science cannot explain. I experienced what my colleagues dismissively called a psychotic episode, but I knew better. What they labeled as madness was actually a systematic exploration of what I came to call the collective unconscious, a realm that exists beyond individual psychology, beyond the personal mind, beyond even the constraints of linear time. Picture this. In 1913, I began having visions of a terrible catastrophe. I saw floods covering Europe, thousands dying, civilization crumbling. My rational mind tried to dismiss these as hallucinations. But then, exactly 1 year later, World War I began, unfolding precisely as I had seen it in my visions. How do you explain that? How does consciousness access information about events that haven't physically occurred yet? The answer terrified me at first. Time, as we experience it, is a construct of our waking consciousness. But in the deeper layers of the psyche, what I discovered was something I called the spacious present. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously, accessible to consciousness when it shifts into these deeper states. Here's what this means. When you dream of deceased relatives, when you experience precognitive visions, when you feel the presence of something beyond the physical, you're not imagining things. You're accessing layers of reality that exist parallel to your everyday awareness. Layers where the boundaries we take for granted between life and death, between past and future, between self and other, simply dissolve. I documented thousands of cases throughout my career. A woman dreams of her brother's death with perfect accuracy 3 days before it happens. A patient describes historical events from centuries ago with details they could never have learned through normal means. A man encounters his deceased father in a dream and receives information about a hidden document that turns out to be exactly where the dream indicated. The materialists called these coincidences, but I had a different term for them: synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that reveal an underlying connection between psyche and matter, between inner and outer reality. These weren't random events. They were evidence of a reality operating on principles that transcend our narrow materialist assumptions. But here's the truly radical part. I came to understand that what we call the physical world and what we call the psychic world aren't separate realms at all. They're two aspects of the same underlying reality. What I termed the unus mundus, the one world where consciousness and matter are fundamentally unified. Think about your own experiences. Those moments when you think of someone and they immediately contact you. When you dream of a place you've never been, only to visit it years later and find it exactly as you saw it. When you walk into a room and sense emotions or presences that others claim aren't there. The rational mind dismisses these, but I'm telling you, these are glimpses of the true nature of reality, breaking through the illusion of separation. I'll share something even more controversial. During my explorations of the unconscious, I encountered autonomous entities, figures that possess their own intelligence, their own agendas, their own wisdom. I called them archetypes: the shadow, the anima, the wise old man, the self. These weren't just symbolic representations. They were actual psychological entities with independent existence in the collective unconscious. Now, you might ask, what does this have to do with the afterlife? everything. Because what I discovered is that consciousness doesn't end with death. It transitions. The individual ego, yes, that dissolves. But the psyche itself, the deeper self, continues in these archetypal dimensions. Dimensions that interpenetrate our physical reality right now. The evidence appears in every culture's mythology, in every religious tradition, in every near-death experience. People across the world, across history, report remarkably consistent experiences. Encounters with deceased relatives, life reviews, transcendent realms, beings of light. The details vary culturally, but the core pattern remains constant. Why? Because they're all accessing the same underlying reality, the same archetypal dimensions that exist beyond individual consciousness. I studied alchemy for decades, and my colleagues thought I'd gone completely mad. Why would a respected psychiatrist waste time on medieval mysticism? But I wasn't studying alchemy as chemistry. I was studying it as a map of psychological transformation. And what I found was extraordinary. The alchemists weren't trying to turn lead into gold. They were documenting the process of psychic transformation, the journey of consciousness through death and rebirth, through dissolution and reintegration. The alchemical stages, the nigredo, the albedo, the rubedo, these describe the soul's journey through what they call the subtle realms, realms we access in dreams, in deep meditation, in moments of profound psychological crisis, realms where the deceased continue their existence, where consciousness explores dimensions beyond physical limitation. Here's something I discovered that the authorities definitely didn't want publicized. During World War II, I conducted classified research into the nature of consciousness and its relationship to physical reality. What we found suggested that consciousness could influence matter directly, that the boundary between subjective and objective reality was far more permeable than accepted science allowed. I'm not talking about wishful thinking or positive affirmations. I'm describing documented cases where focused consciousness produced measurable effects on physical systems, where the collective unconscious manifested as external events, where archetypes took form in the material world. This terrified the establishment because it suggested something radical. If consciousness and matter are fundamentally unified, if the psyche can influence physical reality, then the entire materialist worldview collapses, and with it, all the comfortable assumptions about the nature of existence, the finality of death, and the limits of human consciousness. Think about the implications. If we're already existing in a dimension where consciousness and matter interpenetrate, where the dead remain accessible, where time is non-linear, and where archetypes possess autonomous existence, then what we call physical life might be just one layer of a much vaster reality, a reality that encompasses what we think of as both life and afterlife in a single continuous field of consciousness. I experienced this directly during my near-death experience in 1944. My heart stopped during a heart attack, and what happened next convinced me beyond any doubt. I found myself floating above the earth, seeing it from space before humans had ever achieved spaceflight. I encountered my deceased doctor in a vision, dressed in his true form, and knew immediately that he would die, which he did, exactly as I had foreseen. But most importantly, I experienced a dimension of such reality, such vividness, that physical life seemed like a pale shadow by comparison. I understood in that moment that we're not moving toward the afterlife. We're already in it. Physical reality is the dream, and what we call death is actually awakening to the true nature of existence. The psychiatric establishment tried to explain away my experience as oxygen deprivation hallucinations, but how do you explain accurate precognition? How do you explain seeing Earth from space decades before space travel? How do you explain the profound transformation in consciousness that persisted for the rest of my life? You can't, unless you're willing to accept that consciousness is primary, that physical reality is a subset of a vaster psychic reality, and that what we call the afterlife is actually the ground of being from which physical existence temporarily emerges. Now, I want to share something practical, something you can explore in your own experience. The evidence I'm describing isn't hidden in ancient texts or mystical practices. It's available to you right now, tonight, in your dreams. I spent decades analyzing dreams, mine and those of my patients, and I discovered that dreams are not, as Freud believed, merely disguised wish fulfillment. They're actual experiences in the archetypal dimensions. When you dream, your consciousness shifts its focus from the physical realm to these deeper layers of reality. The deceased you encounter, There aren't symbols or memories, they're actual presences existing in the collective unconscious. Pay attention to your dreams over the next weeks. Notice the ones that feel different, more vivid, more real than ordinary dreams. These are what I call big dreams. Dreams that carry messages from the collective unconscious, from the archetypal dimensions, from what others might call the afterlife. I documented cases where patients received crucial guidance from deceased relatives in dreams, information they couldn't have known through normal means, warnings about future events that proved accurate, teachings about the nature of existence that transformed their understanding of reality. This isn't wishful thinking or self-deception. It's systematic observation of a phenomenon that appears across all cultures and all time periods. The boundary between the living and the dead, between physical and psychic reality, becomes permeable in dreams. And this permeability reveals the true nature of our existence. Here's what the materialists cannot explain. I conducted experiments with the physicist Wolfgang Pauli, exploring the relationship between quantum mechanics and the unconscious. What we discovered suggested that at the quantum level, consciousness and matter are indistinguishable. The observer effect in quantum physics isn't just about measurement, it's about consciousness directly participating in the construction of physical reality. This connects to everything I've been describing. If consciousness constructs reality at the quantum level, if psyche and matter are unified in the unus mundus, if the collective unconscious exists as a dimension beyond individual minds, then the afterlife isn't somewhere else. It's right here, interpenetrating every moment of what you call physical existence. The synchronicities you experience, those meaningful coincidences that seem too perfect to be random, are evidence of this interpenetration. When inner psychic states manifest as outer events, you're witnessing the unified field of consciousness, matter in action. You're seeing proof that reality operates on principles that transcend the materialist paradigm. I've studied cultures around the world, and what I found was remarkable. Indigenous peoples, ancient civilizations, mystical traditions, they all understood something that modern Western culture has forgotten. The veil between worlds is thin. The ancestors remain present. The spirit realm interpenetrates physical reality. These weren't primitive superstitions. They were sophisticated understandings of the true nature of consciousness. The Aboriginal Australians speak of the dream time, a dimension where past, present, and future coexist, where the dead walk with the living, where consciousness creates reality through focused attention. This isn't mythology. It's an accurate description of the collective unconscious, of the archetypal dimensions of what I'm calling the afterlife that we're already experiencing. Tibetan Buddhism describes the bardo states, intermediate dimensions between death and rebirth. But here's what most people miss. These bardo states aren't just experienced after death. They're accessible right now through deep meditation and dream exploration. The afterlife dimensions don't exist in some distant future. They exist parallel to your current awareness. I want to address something directly. Why has this information been suppressed? Why did my colleagues try to silence these findings? Because accepting the reality of the collective unconscious, the existence of archetypal dimensions, the continuity of consciousness beyond death, this threatens the entire edifice of materialist science and the power structures built upon it. If consciousness is primary, if reality responds to psychic states, if death is merely a transition rather than an ending, then fear loses its power. And fear is the primary tool of control used by institutions and authorities. A population that understands its true nature, that recognizes its creative power, that sees through the illusion of separation and finality, cannot be easily controlled or manipulated. This is why mystical experiences are pathologized, why synchronicities are dismissed as coincidence, why dreams are treated as meaningless neural noise. The authorities, whether scientific, religious, or political, require you to believe in the absolute reality of the physical world and the finality of death, because that belief system keeps you locked in fear and limitation. But I'm telling you, based on decades of systematic research and direct experience, you're already living in the afterlife. The dimension you'll fully inhabit after physical death is the very dimension that creates your current experience moment by moment. The collective unconscious isn't waiting for you after death. It's the ground of being from which your consciousness emerges right now. Here's how you can begin exploring this directly. Start with active imagination, a technique I developed for consciously engaging with the unconscious. Sit quietly and allow images to arise spontaneously. Don't direct them or judge them. Simply observe and interact with them as you would actual people or places. What you'll discover is that these aren't just fantasies. They're actual experiences in the archetypal dimensions. Through active imagination, I encountered Philemon, a wise figure who taught me things I didn't consciously know. He existed as an autonomous entity in the collective unconscious, and our conversations provided insights that transformed my understanding of psychology and consciousness. You can have similar encounters with guides, deceased loved ones, and archetypal figures who exist in these dimensions. Pay attention to your synchronicities. When meaningful coincidences occur, don't dismiss them. Recognize them as evidence of the unified field of consciousness matter revealing itself. Ask what message is being communicated. What is the collective unconscious trying to show you through this synchronistic event? Study your dreams systematically. Keep a journal. Notice patterns and recurring symbols. The unconscious speaks in images and symbols because it's communicating from dimensions where language as you know it doesn't exist. Learning this symbolic language opens doorways to direct experience of the archetypal dimensions. Most importantly, question your assumptions about the nature of reality. Every time you dismiss an intuition, ignore a synchronicity, or explain away a mystical experience, you're reinforcing the illusion of separation. You're denying the evidence of your own direct experience in favor of an ideology that serves power structures rather than truth. As I share this, and I'm telling you with absolute certainty, based on everything I've learned and experienced, death is not an ending. It's a transition to fuller consciousness, to more direct experience of the archetypal dimensions that you're already experiencing indirectly right now. The afterlife you imagine as a distant future realm is actually the very ground of your present existence. The evidence is everywhere, in your dreams, in your synchronicities, in your intuitions, in those moments when the veil between worlds grows thin and you glimpse the true nature of reality. Don't let the authorities, scientific or religious, convince you that your direct experience is invalid. Trust what you know in the depths of your being. You're not a biological machine that will simply cease to exist. Your eternal consciousness temporarily focused through physical form, experiencing one layer of a multidimensional reality. The question isn't whether you'll continue after death. The question is whether you'll recognize the true nature of your existence while still in physical form, because that recognition changes everything. How you live, how you create, and how you understand the magnificent eternal being you've always been.